You are welcome to yet another episode of HN What's Your Say? The #1 listening show, where we discuss real issues with real people like you. We are still featuring R. Kelly. Real name Robert Sylvester Kelly. Also known as the R&B King. When we talk about justice, fairness and due process, we expect those principles to begin at the top with the judges. In the courtroom, the judge is supposed to be the voice of neutrality. The embodiment of the Constitution. A referee whose only role is to ensure both sides play by the rules and that the jury remains unbiased. But what happens when the referee puts on a jersey and starts playing for one team? What happens when the judge, the very person sworn to uphold fairness, abuses their position and manipulates the outcome? In the trials of R. Kelly both in New York and Chicago, that's exactly what happened. Let's start with the New York trial overseen by federal Judge Ann Donnelly. Even before the trial began, before opening arguments and before the first witness took the stand, Judge Donnelly made a statement to the jurors that shattered the cornerstone of presumption of innocence. She told them, matters of sex abuse against black women are very serious. At first glance, the comment might seem appropriate. After all, sexual abuse is indeed serious. But this was not a general public service announcement. It was a directive handed down to a jury sworn to impartiality. What's more damning is the context in which it was said. By making this declaration before the evidence was heard, Judge Donnelly implied, if not outright declared, that abuse had taken place. She preloaded the jury with a conclusion. She didn't instruct them to remain neutral, to weigh both sides carefully, or to be wary of the heavy media scrutiny surrounding a celebrity trial. Instead, she told them that the nature of the allegation should already affect how seriously they viewed the defendant. And therein lies the problem. A judge's job is not to advocate for a victim alleged or proven. Their job is to ensure the constitutional rights of the accused are preserved until the jury reaches a verdict based solely on the evidence presented in court, not media coverage or politically charged sentiments. Judge Donnelly, however, discarded that role. She didn't remind the jurors of their duty to ignore headlines and social media noise. She didn't urge caution in reacting to emotionally charged testimony. She didn't highlight the danger of public pressure or the gravity of convicting a man whose name had already been dragged through every tabloid and tweet. Especially knowing she had recruited jurors who had been feasting on the surviving R. Kelly docuseries. Instead, she set the stage with bias. That one sentence, matters of sex abuse against black women are very serious, was not a neutral statement. It was a loaded gun. It fired a psychological signal to the jurors that they were now participating in a cause and not a trial. And by elevating the importance of the accusation before proving guilt, Judge Donnelly replaced their independent reasoning with her own. Let's be clear, the seriousness of a charge has no bearing on the guilt of the accused. That's why trials exist. The justice system is not supposed to weigh the emotion of a crime. It's supposed to weigh the proof. But in R. Kelly's case, the emotion won before the evidence even entered the courtroom. Now consider this: if a judge in any other case had opened with a statement like "murder is a horrible crime and must be punished" before the trial for a murder suspect even began, the defense would cry foul, and rightly so. Why should this be any different with R. Kelly? A judge must not tip the scales. Yet Judge Donnelly tipped them hard against the defendant. But it doesn't end there. Throughout the New York trial, Donnelly continually and openly sided with the prosecution, shaping the narrative, filtering the evidence, and blocking the defense from presenting critical context. She allowed for an emotionally explosive testimony from witnesses whose stories were never fully verified. She allowed a so-called expert witnesses who painted R. Kelly as a predator based on theory and speculation rather than personal knowledge or direct involvement in the events. At the same time, she rejected attempts by the defense to humanize Kelly, to show his contributions to society, or to demonstrate how his fame made him a target. She refused to let the jury hear about the coordinated smear campaigns online. She dismissed arguments about the risk of bias caused by the government's narrative being echoed by major media outlets and celebrities. In a courtroom, every ruling from the judge influences the jury. Every time Donnelly overruled the defense or amplified the prosecution, she reinforced the idea that the state's narrative was the correct one. And make no mistake, jurors pay close attention to the judge. Her body language, her tone, her decisions, they all send signals. Jurors may be the final arbiters of guilt, but when a judge appears to favor one side, that favoritism filters into the jury box like poison. And it wasn't just New York. Over in Chicago, during the separate trial involving allegations of obstruction of justice and child pornography, another federal judge, Judge Leinenweber, took a similar path. In that case, the jury acquitted R. Kelly on several serious charges, an undeniable sign that the prosecution had failed to prove their claims beyond a reasonable doubt. Kelly, along with co-defendants Darrell McDavid and Milton Brown, was found not guilty of obstruction-related charges stemming from the infamous 2008 case. But Judge Leinenweber didn't seem to accept the jury's decision. In his own written opinion later on, he implied that Kelly had obstructed justice anyway. He drew conclusions from evidence that had already been weighed and rejected by the jury. In other words, the judge decided that the jury got it wrong and that he, not the people, knew the truth. Let that sink in. A judge ignored the verdict of a jury and inserted his own belief without new evidence or new testimony. That's not justice. That's judicial activism by the judge himself. That's prejudice in a robe. In both trials, we saw federal judges disregard their sworn duty to serve as neutral arbiters. They became participants, advocates, and in many cases activists. They allowed public sentiment, media pressure, and their own personal beliefs to infect the judicial process. And who suffered? Of course, R. Kelly. This isn't about guilt or innocence in a moral sense. It's about whether R. Kelly was given a fair chance to defend himself in a courtroom where neutrality should be sacred. He wasn't. The record shows it. Prejudicial pretrial statements, biased evidentiary rulings, dismissal of defense arguments, implied rejection of jury verdicts in favor of defendant. All signs of a judicial process gone wrong. We don't have to like R. Kelly. We don't have to enjoy his music. But we do have to demand fairness. Because once we start convicting people based on emotion or allowing judges to steer jurors with their own beliefs, the whole system breaks down. Today it's R. Kelly. Tomorrow it could be anyone. Let's not pretend this didn't happen. Let's not ignore the transcripts. They tell the story plainly. Judges forgot their role. They acted as though the Department of Justice was just another arm of the prosecution, not a co-equal branch of fairness and constitutional balance. That's not how trials are supposed to work. In the end, R. Kelly wasn't just tried by a jury. He was tried by judges who had already formed an opinion of him. He wasn't just prosecuted by the government. He was prosecuted by the very people who were supposed to protect the integrity of the process. It's time we talk about that. It's time we demand better. Because justice doesn't come from forced convictions. It comes from fairness. And in this case, fairness was nowhere to be found. That is all we had for you today on HN What's Your Say? To keep updated whenever we post a new video, subscribe to this channel now. Also remember to hit the bell icon and enable notifications. And feel free to share your opinions with us in the comment section below, and let us know if you would like us to publish your views in our next release. We value all our subscribers' opinions.